All right. I am very excited to have Alicia Sinclair on the show today. Alicia is a founder, an entrepreneur, and one of my favorite people out there in sex tech. So, welcome to Keep Them Coming.
Thank you. Nice intro.
So, you are a CEO of a company that has a few brands underneath of it. It's called Children of the Revolution. And this has Wand, Cowgirl, and Vibe. And
Yes.
I am just curious, how did you decide to become a toy founder? Like, what got you into sex toys?
So my entire professional life has been based in this industry. I kind of, like, as I say, slipped on a banana peel. I graduated from college, and this is how old I am. I answered a Craigslist ad. I was looking for, work. I was going to go back to school. That's kind of where I had my eyes set. And then I ended up working I started as a receptionist in a pleasure products company. And then at that time, so we're talking 2002 was when I originally started. There weren't a lot of women, and there weren't a lot of I think people didn't consider it a career, and it wasn't a place where a lot of college educated folks were. And so I was promoted pretty quickly, and I learned a lot about the company, and I ended up becoming a salesperson. And so that's really how I started learning a lot about pleasure products. And in that process of, starting as an assistant, then becoming an account manager, at one point I moved and I took a job as a vice president of sales. This is a long period of time.
Cool.
But I love the industry, and I found that there was a big gap between the folks that were designing, manufacturing, selling products and the sex education industry. There actually weren't many sex educators
Mm.
in the industry. And in 2015, the company that I was working for was acquired by a private equity firm. And excuse me, that was in 2013. And then in 2015, they decided to let all of the staff go. And so
Mm.
at that time, I had been really inspired to become a sex educator. It was already in process. And that led me to starting my own company because I had just been through, like you go through acquisition processes, it's a lot mentally. And I was ready. I was like ready to do something different in the industry. And that's how we formed Children of the Revolution and then started the three brands.
That is fantastic that you saw a gap and decided to do something about it, because I feel like it has been in the last 10 years, especially, that there's been a big shift from just like glittery jelly like vibrators to having something that is non-phallic, something that is higher quality, and also brands that come with some education along with them.
Yes,
So
definitely.
how did you start integrating sex education and pleasure education into all of this?
So originally, when I was still a salesperson, we in our marketing department, so at the company I worked at prior to founding COTR, we had hired a sexologist who was from the Kinsey Institute. And she and I went on the road. There wasn't a lot of education in retail stores. And so we would do product trainings. It's very common in our industry. We would take a 2 hour block. And normally you would share that with there'd be two manufacturers. We would take a 2 hour block. She would do a sex ed boot camp.
Mm.
So it would be like anatomy, common questions, like sexual issues, like things that people would come into the store sort of seeking help for. And so we educated retailers about these things. And then I would follow with a product training, sort of combining this information. So that's really how I got started. Later, as I said, during post acquisition, though, unfortunately, that incredible human being was let go from the company. And I was just so angry. That's when I became a certified sex educator. And then as we started COTR, it was always my mission number one. We started with Vibe. That was actually our first brand, which is a all but toy brand. And so I just saw a huge opportunity hole in the marketplace to to like fill everything with information because it's a category of sex that is oftentimes associated with pain. People don't know a lot of, there was definitely not a lot of comprehensive sex positive information available. And so what we did was we created a little guide to anal play that's still included in every one of our products. It's non-gendered. So like anybody could read it regardless of their sexuality or orientation. And that was, that's, as I said, still included in every item. And then we launched our blog, which if you've been on B Vibes blog, I think it would be safe to say it's probably, I think, one of the like leading, if not, like, I'm very proud of it. There's
Yeah.
we now call it the Anal Academy because there's just
It is.
so many different resources. There's podcasts, there's live workshops, there's blog articles. We even filmed Butt Stuff Basics. So that was really where my passion went into for sex ed. I just saw that as a huge opportunity that people weren't talking about. And because butt stuff is really the equal opportunity orifice, there was a real opportunity to also make it an inclusive and safe place for many people. So it became a way for me to really express a lot of my values, and create a mission in the brand. And I think, for anyone who's been in a career path for a long time, at some point you kind of question, is this what I want to be doing? Is this who I am? And I was at that stage in my career. I'd been in the business for 15 years. And that really solidified the fact that I was like, yeah, I can make a difference. This is like my passion, like I can put education, I can like change the way that people think about this category. And I can do that through not just the consumer's experience, but their retail experience when they go into the stores, the way the packaging looks, the way the information is provided on the boxes, and so on and so forth.
Yes, absolutely. Can I ask, what year was it you founded B Vibe?
So we founded COTR in 2015, and then we launched our first product, our first brand, which is B Vibe, in 2016.
Okay, because I was going to say, I remember in about 2017, that was when I started with Sex Coach You. And that was kind of
Yeah.
how I first heard about you.
Yeah.
And, I started going to the stores more often and looking at brands. And I had, of course, gone into sex toy stores before that. But I noticed a difference in the way that your products were not only displayed, but the information that came with it. Most butt plugs are just the butt plug, and it tells you to clean
Yeah.
it. And that's about it. But it doesn't give you any specifics about how to actually engage with your very first butt plug.
Right. Yeah. Or like that you need lube, or that, like, here's how you do an enema if you're like worried about poop, which, believe me, everybody is, because it's the number one question of anything I've ever done ever. And everyone that works for us has answered the same question. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of cool to know that like we're oftentimes somebody's like resource, for empowering that experience in people's lives, couples' lives,
Yeah.
like all those experiences.
Yes. I have the anal training kit in my office so that I
Yes.
can get it out, open it up, show it to people. It has like the lube launcher and the enema, thing as part of it. And
Yeah.
then a huge guide that's got so much information. I've gone through that guide and walked people through, okay, when you
Yeah.
get this is what you're going to do. And they feel so much more comfortable and more empowered to explore butt stuff. And I love what you said about, obviously, that the butt, it's the one thing that we all have. It's the great equalizer in the bedroom. We can all get pleasure from booties. So thank you.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, my pleasure. Believe me.
Make my job easier for sure with having that information. Like, they don't have to try to recall all the things that I told them in an office setting. They've got it right there. So thank you for that.
My pleasure, literally.
Yeah. So it is Women's History Month, and I want to take a second to acknowledge, a little bit of the history of the vibrator. For those of you listening that don't know, the vibrator was first created by male doctors to cure hysteria, which we know isn't a real thing these days, but they were using vibrators to get their patients off, to ease their anxieties, all these other like weird different things. But obviously the vibrator has evolved over time. But what are some of the main, I guess, lingering attitudes about vibrators that you think stop people from choosing to explore their sexuality with a vibrator? Because I've definitely heard some objections, but what do you think is kind of lingering from some of that, I guess, puritanical viewpoint?
I think the number one things I hear people talking about is that they won't ever be able to have what they call normal sex again, meaning that they won't be able to orgasm without a vibrator. I think that's a really big concern. And valid, I guess, if you like, my question is always like, but why would you want to? just just saying, if something's feeling really good and you're enjoying yourself, I'm not really sure why you would want to do it without it, but
And why do they
yes.
have to be mutually exclusive?
Right.
Can't they just be integrated? Like a vibrator, different kinds of vibrators are easy to
Yeah.
utilize during
Different
penetration.
kinds of sex. Yeah, like I was like, now my husband, my longtime partner, we used to say like, should we kick it old school today? Like like no vibrator, or like, and that is different positions. So like as you explore your sexuality, maybe there's certain positions that you can experience orgasm without a vibrator, and certain positions where are like you're gonna see stars, especially if you use a vibrator. Like, so like that's kind of the fun thing, is like I have a lot of friends and they know what I do, and are still extremely shy to talk about it. And I'm just always trying to remind them, like, your sexuality is like so fun to explore. Like, don't limit yourself on ideas that like, I'm never going to be able to have normal sex again. First of all, like, no sex is normal. Like, just get that. It's like when somebody's like, what's your best vibrator? Well, that's also like subjective to your body and what you like.
Mhm.
There's no best. There's only like, maybe what people are most familiar with.
Yeah, absolutely. There is no normal.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm with you. When I hear that, oh, but what if I can't orgasm with just a penis? Are you orgasming right now with just a penis?
Yeah, that's sometimes what you want to remind people. Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah. And why would you, like, why do you have to? Like, who it's only you. It's only you and your whomever you're having sex with. That's it.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So I often get people to try vibrators for the first time, especially when I get them to understand what the orgasm gap is, or the pleasure gap.
Mm, yeah.
That really got highlighted in that 2017 study by Frederick et al., showing there's about a 30% difference between heterosexual couples and how often the male-bodied person or penis-owning person orgasms versus the vagina-owning person.
Yes.
So 30% is a pretty big gap.
Yeah.
And one of the key things that they showed in that research too is that when the female bodied person utilizes a vibrator, the gap is reduced. But what are some of your favorite positions and favorite toys to utilize? Like, 'cause, I mean, we, even as sexologists or sex educators, we've come to learn about our bodies, and we know what we need, to get off. So this isn't just about like us,
Yeah.
but also we're going to talk a little bit about maybe personal experiences and slight reference here. So like, what are some of your favorite toys and positions to help close the orgasm gap between you and your partner?
Um, so I would say like, if I'm like, my go-to sort of favorite that I know is going to work every time, is I'm a wand person. I like an original sized classic wand, hence the wand. That is my like go-to product. I like the head of that. If you're not familiar with why wands are so popular, aside from being readily available in the marketplace, it's quote unquote back massagers.
Mm-hmm.
I like the big broad head. It, pinpoint vibration is uncomfortable for me. So I like big, bassy, deep vibrations that sort of like resonate in the body. So wands really work well for me. And I think doggy style position is probably got to be one of my favorites, specifically with a vibrator. It's not something I would enjoy otherwise, because there's otherwise no clitoral stimulation. Unless, right, it's manual of some, your hands, a vibrator, whatever that is. So that is my like go-to, like my scene stars position. I think that's probably our classic. I'm trying to think, do you want me to keep going, or you have one? I would love to
Well, and
hear.
like, I also love a wand, and my seeing stars one is like being on my back, my legs over him, and he's behind me, because again, like,
Yeah, I was trying to, is
access
that
for different toys
starfish?
matters.
Yeah, I like, and then because then you're kind of in a position where your hands are free. You don't have to support yourself. Like one of the other person's hands is free. Yeah, so like you could hold the vibrator, the other person could hold the vibrator. That's a great. I love that might be my runner up.
Mhm. Well, and you've also got some really awesome smaller toys that are not phallic. It's one thing I love about your brand. So many people don't want a phallic vibrator, a phallic sex toy.
Yeah.
So some of the smaller ones too, if something larger and heavier isn't your thing, you've got some of these smaller toys. And tell me about some of how did you come to develop some of your smaller toys? Like, did you have studies? Did you have people come in and try? What was product testing like for that process?
Product testing is always fun, I should say. But the Mini Vibes collection, which was the next segue from wands, that was really about, we received a lot of feedback that people wanted smaller products. And so those are what I would say are the classic, handheld shapes: a bullet, a mini bullet, a two prong, right? So basically something that can lie on either side of the clitoris or play with nipples. And then we have the point, which is one of my favorites. That's almost like a little pebble that can fit in your hand. And the double vibe, which is a really powerful, similar, dual motor product. And so those are all, and they're all made of chrome steel. So what I like about them is they really are like jewelry. They have the same feeling. They look like jewelry. They're a little bit heavier. So I like that because you get less of that buzzy vibration, again, more bass vibration. And they fit really because of the weight, they stay a little better. You can play with both sides. You have like, a silicone side or something that's smooth. So like those are really the process of how are people going to use these, right? And also like we have to consider always what a consumer is comfortable buying. If you ask me, some of the best products that we make are the stainless steel products, but that's by far not our highest selling category because people don't feel comfortable purchasing those products, right? That's I think when you're in a 201, maybe even 301 stage of your pleasure product experience, you're like, okay, I've tried silicone, I've tried that. Like, so in any case, my point before I like digress, really what I'm trying to say is we're thinking about what a consumer is going to feel comfortable purchasing. And so we make shapes that are familiar. We create a little bit higher power motors, more settings, package it. Again, those all come with an informational guide in them, a guide to using Mini Vibes. So most of the products are all about where we feel there is a demand in the marketplace and where we can be a market leader. If there's already something there that we feel that is, for example, we would never develop a suction toy, in my opinion. That's not something that like is missing, but yeah, a lot of times product testing is also about giving it out to staff, then to sex educators. And then once we've gone through 2 rounds of that, to give it to what I would call civilians, people who've never used products, and then let them test them and come back to us with comments.
I'm sure it's not hard to find people who have never tried products, considering the amount of objections that I hear out there. But also, the sex toy industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. So there's a fair amount of people out there who are accessing these, but also a wide variety of people out there who have yet to access toys. So we talked about one objection there with, how to, get people into toys, but I'm also thinking about some of the couples out there, again, going back to closing the orgasm gap there. An objection that I have heard from couples is, he isn't going to enjoy me using a sex toy with him. It's going to make him feel inferior.
Interesting.
So what do you think are some of the best ways to overcome some of that fear that he's going to, I guess, be jealous of the sex toy?
Yeah, the be jealous and be replaced. That's what I've heard, is that the vibrator will replace you. Well, I mean, I just always like to remind people that, chocolate sauce tastes great on ice cream, right? It doesn't have to be sort of one or the other. And I don't want to get into like a long psychological conversation, but if your partner isn't interested in your sexual pleasure during sex, and is worried that something's going to help you achieve orgasm, is going to replace them, I think that's an insecurity that they need to deal with. And, and also just like on a side note, it's really sexy to watch somebody else like play with themselves, and maybe, starting with something like mutual masturbation might feel safer, right? Like, watch, for example, I'll use my dynamic in a heterosexual couple. like for me to masturbate and watch my husband masturbate at the same time, it takes sort of away the responsibility of the other person pleasing the other person. We each get to watch each other being pleased and learn about what the intensity of the stroke looks like, or maybe how long it takes them to come to orgasm, or like what different positions they put their body in, because you can replicate those and like have fun with it and like make it better than they like that's. And it's the same way, like you would want your partner to understand where on your body vibration or pressure feels good, and in what position you can really achieve an orgasm. So you can look at it as a way to like just empower your sex life with your partner. And I always like to remind people, the better sex that you're having, probably the more you're going to want to have it.
Mhm.
So your partner should be invested in your orgasm, like just for their own
Yes.
orgasm, like it's
Yeah.
cyclical, the better the sex life, the more you want to be a part of it.
Yes. And also, even if she's having more orgasms on her own with these toys, the neurotransmitters in that feeling of sexiness, it gets increased anytime that you're starting, no matter who your orgasm is with, by yourself or with your partner. If you're having
Yeah.
more orgasms, you want more sexy time overall. And like the replacement thing, sir, if you think that a toy is going to replace you, what else are you bad at? Like,
Right. And like a human body, like a person kissing you and, you
yes,
know,
it'll never be
feeling
replaced.
a body on top of a body. And also like all of the intimacy that comes with having a partner that does many other things with you.
Yes.
It's not a replaceable thing. So
Absolutely not.
yeah.
Absolutely not. I've never ever had any client ever go like, "Oh my God, that toy was so good. I don't need my husband anymore." So yeah. I also try to tell guys, or ask them this, do you have a screwdriver? Do you also have a drill? They always say yes. You can
Uh-huh.
use the screwdriver for the same thing the drill does. You're just going to do it a lot slower.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's going to take a little more time.
They usually
Right.
get it after that.
You're right. That's a good one. I've used like toothbrush before. I'm like, you could brush your teeth manually, but the screwdriver one is brilliant.
Yeah, because it relates
Might
to
have
the
to use
tools
that.
usually, right? Yeah.
Yes, very smart.
I, of course, I'm not trying to laugh at anyone who might have these objections, but it is a little bit comical to hear that particular objection to me. Like, you're really fearing a toy? Like, let's talk this out a little bit.
And I think that it really boils down to masculinity. Like I would say,
Yeah.
men have been taught for a long time that they're supposed to be the person that like gives pleasure, and it's like part of their manhood. And so I can understand the reasoning, well, if I can't give this orgasm, there's something wrong with me. And that therefore, I don't know if people are consciously thinking about that, but that's how I see that. And I do have sympathy for that. But like, take a second and logically think about, right? Like, this could also be really fun for you. Like, this
Yeah.
could be really fun. And if your significant other is really, and you can go into sex sorts together. Like, you could say, okay, I'll pick out a toy and you buy lingerie,
Yes.
or let's try something new tonight. Or, I mean, and you think a vibrator is just one thing. Like, there's an entire category of products, like bondage gear, and I say that like not just, like handcuffs and ties, and like there's little like, there's just so much fun to be had. And like if you really like limit yourself, theoretically you're only going to have sex with this person, right? Unless you have an open relationship. But let's say for the most part, the majority of us are having sex with one other person.
Mhm.
So like make it adventurous. Like, you know, like give yourself a little bit of fun for your own personal needs, not just for your other partner.
Yes. And I think a lot of that stems from there's such a lack of sex education. And in the absence of education about pleasure and the variety of things that can produce pleasure, guys tend to use porn, right? They tend to use
Yeah.
conversations with their friends, and they're not getting the education about pleasure that they deserve.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is hard. I mean, again, the information isn't really out there, like pornography is, it's fake, you know, it's meant to, right, it's just like a romance novel maybe for a woman, you know, like it's a fantasy. And I, you know, like, yes, it's cool you get to but there's a lot of stuff that goes into that fantasy, like the fact that someone's paid to do that, that's being left out of your conversation, you
Yeah.
know. So you just have to remember this is not real life. And
Yes.
if you have a partner that does all those things with you, that's cool. And I hope you're using a vibrator with them.
Yes. 100%. 100%. So what do you think is next in sex tech? We've seen a big change, and there's a lot more products out there that are especially of higher quality and
Yeah.
better body safe materials. But yeah, what do you see as being the next phase for sex toys and sex tech?
A lot of people are talking about technology upgrades, like what that might look like. You know, products that replicate more human sensation.
Mhm.
So that, and we've already seen a big, I don't know how popular they are in like the general consumer category right now, but what we've seen is really interesting, right? So things that can replicate the sensations of fingers more accurately, um, mouths more accurately, even vaginal canals or anal canals. So we've seen like mechanisms that do that. So I think we might see that technology become more and more readily available at like price points that are affordable. That's kind of, you know, sort of how that works in any tech, you know, in any part of technology or consumer electronics. I also am curious. I've seen some of it, but it's not really been utilized in our industry quite yet. But, you know, VR is, we do have some companies that are using virtual reality experiences. And I wonder how, you know, AI may also become involved in that. So I think all of these things, I think the next stage is really going to be technology upgrades. You know, in my dream world, it would be, you know, the ability to market ourselves to consumers, but I think we're way far off from that. So I think in the meantime, we'll continue to develop better and better technologies to replicate different types of sensations. What effect that will have in general, I'm not 100% sure in the sex toy industry, right? If that will be what it looks like now, or if that will be something that's more like virtual reality based.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. My very first podcast episode was actually about VR porn.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's come a long way since 2019, I guess, when I did that episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, I tend to agree with you that I think that the integration of either the toys or things like that with VR and some form of AI, to where it's so much of porn oftentimes is it's based on what they think the general consumer is going to like. But
Mm-hmm.
if you don't like things such as being called names, something that's sort of derogatory,
Yeah.
or you want like a different viewpoint, those are harder to come by. So how do you figure out what this individual consumer wants to see, what they want to hear? A porn gets ruined for me as soon as it goes from ass to mouth. I can't do it. Um, like,
Like,
but
nope.
I can't, if I'm watching the free stuff and even sometimes the paid stuff I watch, I can't always avoid that or know that that's what's coming next in the scene. So
Yeah.
I suppose one thing that I would like is for AI to know me as a viewer and what
Yeah.
turns me on, and how do I program that? Well, maybe it's because it goes through my history on this website or something. I don't know, but
Yeah.
there's got to be a way for the experience to be better. But I wish that there was a way for that experience with VR, all that, to be I guess more feminist,
Yeah.
more, just not degrading or no derogatory, but not trying to yuck someone else's yum. If you want to be called a dirty little slut, okay, cool. But then there's so much stuff in there that is, especially when it's fake, when it's VR and it's not real people that were filmed. It's just,
Yeah.
you can make it do anything. And then I worry about what some younger consumers could be seeing in that industry. Because
Yeah.
something to try to get people to pay people to do certain things. Like, we're old enough to have seen Two Girls, One Cup.
Yeah. It opens the door to a lot of moral questions that we don't really have the answers to. And, we're all sort of an experiment right now, like how technology is going to affect all of us. Because let's face it, I got my first iPhone when I was 24 years old. So that was less than 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see 100 years from now when they do, studies on this time period, what those results are. But I think some things that are alarming that are sort of not really, but are also part of this conversation is the AI relationships that are being had romantically.
Mm-hmm.
And if those, like, there are real dolls that are already able to talk and respond, and like sort of what are these, like what does that look like in the world in the future? And I don't know if I would consider that part of the sex toy industry, because I think that's a completely different category, but they do segue, right, just like the adult film industry does. So it'll be, yeah, I think the world is in a very interesting place in all marketplaces to see how everything flushes out, but it will definitely be an interesting next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to try to come out to the show in July in Burbank.
Oh, cool.
And see you all and see some other toy manufacturers, see what's going on. Just for the listeners, I haven't really said much, but I've got a plan brewing for a new business. So yeah, we got to come out and see sex toys. That's all I'll say.
Excellent.
So, Lillian, circling back to Women's History Month, who is a woman in women's history that serves as inspiration for you, whether that's in sex tech or just history in general?
History in general. I mean, I think Oprah is pretty damn trailblazing, like she's always my go-to as someone who really just like did her own thing and did it her way. And I think has just the things I know about how she runs her company and how she treats her employees, and the tremendous amount of success she's had and like who she's represented in the world. I think she's done an excellent job at doing that. I mean, I have other folks that I like, for example, Eleanor Roosevelt, are like, I want to say quote unquote president, that like ran our country for a bit, which Beverly never gets much acknowledgement for. I think a lot of, I have a book just of her quotes. And I know that's like a really weird, like not sexy person for me to be talking about, but like just some of the things that she says have always been really helpful for me, like as just a human. And so I really admire like what she did at that particular time, so I think and then, the folks at Planned Parenthood, I think, I don't know that people realize that they're responsible for, I mean, during college, that was the place that I got birth control, that I got my pelvic exams, that, literally served as my healthcare provider. And I don't think that they get the amount of credit because they do abortions that they deserve. And I think they really take care of women and have provided true family planning for them. And I don't want to name what, like, there's every person that's held the baton at Planned Parenthood has done incredible work. So I just think as an organization and all of these sub offices that are run, like these, every single one of them is like going sort of against the grain in their community oftentimes, and the amount of discrimination that they must feel. And I think it's pretty, like, I don't know, pretty incredible what work that they do.
Agreed. I've also received healthcare from Planned Parenthood, never an abortion, but plenty of exams, plenty of tests, plenty of just help and support with my sexual health or just my pelvic health. Like, sometimes we're not just going in there because we're having sex. Sometimes we're just having an issue and we need
a medical. Yeah.
It's just the doctor's office. That's the main thing. They weren't even really doing abortions until the 70s as an organization.
I mean, they used to go door to door, just helping folks with family planning and medical care. So I think you have to really give them credit for what they've built and made available to a lot of lower income folks in our country.
Agreed. Absolutely. Well, the way that I typically wrap up my show is with an Ask Coach Kristen Anything segment. And always looks a little bit different when I'm talking to someone that is in the industry versus just like a friend. So I always say that this segment is your time to just get my opinion on something, maybe settle a dispute, or ask for a friend. So you can ask me anything about sex.
When do you think is a good time to talk to kids? I have a daughter, she's 18 months old. And so I'm like, when is a good time to start talking to her about her sexuality and about, explaining what sex is and relationships? Like, when do you think is a good age to start doing that?
I think it has to be ongoing, and it has to be, of course, age appropriate.
Yeah.
Things like when she first really starts to understand that concept of mommy and dad, like you are parents, you created her. That comes fairly early. And when you start having to answer questions about, especially like, how was I made? How are babies made? Those questions can either be ignored or they can be explained in just the most basic scientific ways. And I think a lot of times parents too get caught up in the how am I going to explain all this, rather than focusing on just answer the question either that they present or address the thing that comes up as it happens.
Yeah.
Like for example, my cousin's son saw on my phone, I had like a 3D clitoris in my hand, and that was my wallpaper. And he was like, "What's that?" And I looked at him, I was like, "Are you ready for me to explain this?" He's like, "Go for it." Okay. I've tried to talk to him about stuff and he won't listen. And I just looked at him, I said, "Well, this is a 3D model of a clitoris, and it's for pleasure, and it's something that women or people who have vaginas have." And he was like, "Okay." And then he walked away.
Yeah.
So keep in mind that at times you're just going to be giving those quick little lessons. And as long as they're factually based, and like you don't have to launch often into a big explanation, sometimes the simplest answer is going to be the best. Like, "Mommy, where did I come from?" Well, you came from my body, and we made you, and we are parents. Parents don't always look like us. Sometimes they look like two mommies. Sometimes they look like two daddies, or two other people that aren't mommies or daddies. They're neither. So I think that there's lots of great resources out there to help with ages and stages. But one of my favorite books is actually by a sexologist that you might know, Dr. Lene St. John. And she wrote a book called Read Me, a Parental Primer for the Talk.
Okay.
It's much more about helping parents understand their own stuff, which you probably have a great handle on your stuff. Maybe your partner can use some more support with that, but it may just give you some more like, okay, I feel confident knowing these things, I'm going to be okay. But then she also lists out some really essential pillars to talk about, things like communication. She talks about fantasy. She does address porn. That's going to be a much later stage thing for you. But, in the early stages, she's talking about how it is about checking your comfort levels and knowing that sometimes things are going to be awkward, and that you do just kind of like, okay, this might be awkward, but we're going to talk about it. I'm sure you're going to do all the things like proper body part names.
Yeah, we tell her already. Like she's kind of to that stage where, she touch it, like it's normal. They're, babies want to like, what's this thing? It's down here. You're touching it all the time. You're changing diapers. So we just tell it, that's your vagina. Your vagina, we use all the right terms. I try not to tell her she came from my tummy, she came from my uterus, like we try to make sure that she uses, but yeah, it is to that point where, and I obviously would never like shame her for any, but like, it's like when I think I'm curious, just because I want to, I'm always like, what's the right way to do this thing or that thing? And even as a sex educator, it's like, I'm not like a sex educator for children. My, my specialty is pleasure. And so like, how do I make sure that I educate my child in the right way at the right time? Right. Like, when is age appropriate? Like, am I going to know? But that book sounds like maybe I should delve a little deeper.
I also have this book actually that's called Great Mentoring, and it's from Planned Parenthood. And this does have an outline. This is a really great resource that I've used, but also to go back to, there probably is no right or wrong way, 100%. Right.
Right.
It's a balance between being proactive and bringing things up like boundaries and consent. And you don't have to hug someone you don't want to hug. And your body is your own body. Those little things when they're 3 and 4 and they're starting to become aware of bodily autonomy versus the consent conversation when they're teenagers. Like if she says no, or if he says no, that means no. And your no should be like, it gets firmer, it gets expanded. But I know for a lot of both clients I've educated about their kids and then just seeing my friends' kids, a lot of it is just, you're going to have to go with the flow in the moment when they, start touching themselves.
Like let them lead the way.
Yeah. But also do be cautious as they get to like the 10, 11 mark. They'll stop asking questions. So you're probably going to start guiding
being proactive. Okay. That's useful. Yeah. That's useful.
I had a friend this weekend approach me and was like, we need help. We need a book. So I'm reaching out to some other friends here, but their 7-year-old is like touching herself and orgasming, but then peeing, but they're like, hey, so like, you're doing this and this is normal. She's like, no, I'm not doing that. I don't know what you're talking about. So she's completely shutting down and denying it.
Yeah.
So know too, that no matter how sex positive and how open-minded and communicative you are, your kids are also slightly just wired the way that they are.
Yeah, right.
While those two, probably never imparted any shame or belief that masturbation or solo touch was bad, this little girl has picked that up from somewhere. So like, I'm going to help them try to dissect that and get through that. But nothing is going to probably go the way that you think it will. Sorry.
That's what my husband always says. He's like, the biggest problems are the ones you don't know about yet. The ones you haven't thought about.
Yes. So,
well, it's exciting.
Alicia, this has been a wonderful interview. I am so appreciative of your time today. And of course, I want to give the listeners an opportunity to find your products. So how do they find you?
On the websites, you can go to bvibe.com. That's be like butt, bvibe.com, or lawanmassager.com, or Ride the Cowgirl. And it's pretty much all the same handles for social. So it's, bvibe_social, Lawan Massager, and Ride the Cowgirl.
We didn't actually end up talking about the Cowgirl during this episode.
That's true. We didn't.
let's round out the episode with a little bit about that product line. So, it's when I show people that website, they're like, oh. So tell us what that is. What you got going on with Cowgirl?
Well, I think that's really, it's like a showpiece of a sex toy. It's literally the size of like, a small stool. So it is an insanely powerful vibrator. And at the time that we redesigned and rethought that particular product, there were like kind of half-barreled products that were similar to that. We call them riding style sex machines. That's the category. So there were other things on the marketplace. There still are, obviously, but they're like very old, often very like heterosexual and sort of, if I'm being really honest, trashy looking. And so our goal was to make the product, ours is a little bit bigger. It has a saddle style seat. It's more comfortable. It's just rethought from the eyes of the rider, if you will, the most oftentimes. Yeah. For the person who's actually sitting on it. And then, we made all, just a lot of small touches that, you would expect from a product that comes from COTR, like just everything is modeled after high-end musical equipment. So like everything removes really easily. It has handles, it picks up, it moves. It has an app, like you could use it in, virtually like across the United States from one person to another. It works for camming sites. So, people can tip cam models and watch them. But it's really like oftentimes people ask me, who buys this product? Well, I can't really answer that question. I don't but I would say
who buys your product. Girls who grew up humping pillows and teddy bears.
Exactly. That's the only product that allows you to be in a rider on top position. And you can choose to have an insertable attachment or something that's just vibration. But when I tell you, like, you've heard this expression before, I'm sure, full body orgasms. You've heard that. This is like it's literally like, think about a motor of like, I know this is like might scare people, but like like the motor is the size of like, it's like, so like the vibration power can be felt. Like if we turn it on at a trade show, like the booth next door is like, like what is, you can feel it. And like that type of intensity in your body, it's pretty cool. So it's something that if you, personally want to explore, you're like really interested in, elevating your orgasm or putting on a show for your partner. A lot of people use it as a way to explore threesomes, right? As like sort of it's so big that you can have this almost like third body type experience.
Mm-hmm.
So it is that product. It's really a showpiece and it's definitely a commitment. But I think like it's if you can have one, you're really in sort of like pleasure products paradise.
Yes. Yes.
It's
All of
fun.
that. Yes. The
Yeah.
Cowgirl is goals for me. That's like, I've been trying to be like less of a consumer. I do get a lot of free product, obviously, but when
Yeah.
it comes to purchasing my stuff, I want to make sure that I'm getting high quality products. So it is on my list.
Well, I know a girl.
Right?
I know a girl.
So it is something that when I have shown people, they are just like, oh,
Blown away. Yeah.
yeah, I had never thought about doing that, but I need one of those like
Yeah.
ASAP. So thank you again. Thank you for
Very
everything
well.
that you do in, both the world of pleasure, but just in sex tech in general. Again, I love seeing the changes that we've had over the last decade, and your
Yeah.
companies have been a big part of that. So thank you for all you do.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much for being my guest on Keep Them Coming. And maybe I'll get to meet you when I get out there to California, one of those shows. And
I'm counting on it.
okay, perfect.